I'm Dr. Amanda Strayer-Scherer. I'm a new assistant professor and extension plant pathologist with Auburn University and Alabama Cooperative Extension. I often joke that I'm the new Austin Hagen, so it's good that Austin went before me. So here I'm going to talk about just evaluating some alternatives to chlorothalonil for peanut disease management in Southeast Alabama. So just before I get started, I'll kind of give a quick summary of the main diseases that we're looking at in this trial. Probably the most important and common and destructive foliar diseases of peanuts in Alabama are the early and late leaf spot diseases. These can cause extreme defoliation on peanuts and can lead to weakened pegs and bare stems, resulting in pod shed. If left uncontrolled, these can cause yield losses of 20 to 30%. They can be hard to differentiate between one another, especially when the peanuts become extremely defoliated. But early leaf spot, you'll typically get these small brown to reddish brown circular spots surrounded by a yellow halo on the upper leaf surface that when you flip the leaf over, they're sometimes orange in color. Late leaf spot, you get these small dark brown to black lesions with a feathery margin. And at least in Alabama, depending on where you are in the state, when we get both diseases, we'll get early leaf spot a little earlier on in the season, hence the name, and then late leaf spot will come in anywhere as early as July or as late as mid to late August. It just really depends on where you are in the state. So probably the next one that's another important foliar disease of peanuts in Alabama. It occurs more sporadically and it's not a big issue most years. It can be if it left uncontrolled, which is peanut rust. It typically shows up first in Baldwin County, which is in the southwest part of Alabama, and then it'll kind of expand from there to Covington, Geneva, and Houston counties. And we normally see it show up in late July to early August. Last year was kind of an odd year. We actually had trials in Southwest Alabama where we were looking for rust, but it showed up in the Wiregrass in the Southeast. So sometimes we never know with diseases what they're going to do, but it's easy to identify just based on the appearance of numerous tiny reddish orange pustules that are on the underside of leaves. So shifting from foliar diseases, the most common and destructive soil-borne disease of peanuts in Alabama is white mold. You'll also hear it called stem rot, and depending on which pathologist you talk to and which part of the Southeast, you'll hear it referred to as one or the other. In Alabama, we like to call it white mold. You can get severe yield losses with this one, where you can get 40 to 50% yield losses. This pathogen attacks the roots, pods, and pegs. And badly damaged pods are usually shed before harvest and will often turn dark brown and then disintegrate in the soil. It typically appears in peanuts after vine growth has started to slow and numerous pods are being set. A lot of times in mid to late July, you'll see a sudden wilting or flagging of terminal or lateral limbs of peanut plants kind of in sporadic areas in the field. If left uncontrolled, it can spread pretty quickly. Under conducive conditions, so wet, hot weather, which is pretty much what is affecting the whole state of Alabama right now, you can see white felt-like growth and sclerotia that often appear on the soil surface. So in terms of management for these diseases, producers in Alabama and the Southeast use a variety of strategies, including crop rotation, cultivar selection, which is often the kind of first line of defense, especially for tomato spotted wilt. Cultivars will vary in their disease tolerance or resistance packages. They'll also use cultural practices by adjusting planting dates, seeding rates, tillage practices. But what I'll focus most on today is fungicide selection. So this is kind of similar to Bob Kemmeright's slide that he had a few presentations ago. This is just basically to show that producers have a wide range of products to select for in terms of fungicides for peanuts. This is by far not an exhaustive list. This is just to give a good overview on the different products that are out there for producers to select from when trying to manage some of these peanut diseases. So in terms of fungicide spray programs, we often recommend to producers to start their spray programs between 30 to 45 days after planting, and then future applications are made in a 14-day interval. And so these are just some of the peanut RX spray program guides that are put out every year by various companies, including Bayer, Syngenta, FMC, BASF, National, and Valent. And one of the things I wanted to highlight in these, you'll see often, regardless of the spray program, chlorothalonil is the most common denominator among these spray programs, where a lot of times we'll have them early on in the season or as tank mix partners with white mold products like Umbra and Convoy. And then we'll have them, as the last spray in the season. And chlorothalonil is really used in Alabama for rust as well. So just continuing on the importance of chlorothalonil, it's one of the most commonly used fungicides worldwide. It's not used just in peanuts, it's used in vegetable crops and several others. And in terms of peanuts, it's one of the few multi-site fungicides that we do have that is registered for peanuts that we use pretty regularly in our spray programs. Most of our other fungicides are single site fungicides where they're SDHI, QOI, or DMI fungicides that are at higher risk for fungicide resistance than a multi-site fungicide like chlorothalonil. What a lot of times we'll see is different products might combine some of these FRAC code groups where you might have a 7 plus 11, so a SDHI and a DMI, or a QOI and SDHI, just to kind of help combat some of that resistance development that is seen in other crops for some of these fungicide groups. The main concern for us is the status of chlorothalonil in the European Union. So it was recently banned due to concerns over potential health risks and impacts on wildlife, especially aquatic organisms. The EU issued a stop sale date of November 2019 and a stop use date of May 20th of last year. So producers in the US can still use chlorothalonil. It has not been banned for use in the United States, but this is something that we always try and keep an eye on. What are other countries doing with some of these fungicides that we use? And what could that potentially mean for US agriculture? And if a similar thing happens, what alternative can we have for chlorothalonil? So that leads to the objective of this study, where we wanted to evaluate the effect of various alternative fungicides to chlorothalonil and kind of determine their efficacy on leaf spot diseases, rust, and white mold under field conditions. For this experiment, we had 14 different spray programs with 6 reps organized in a randomized complete block design. We used cultivar Georgia 16HO, which was planted May 28th of last year at the Wiregrass Research and Education Center in Headland, Alabama, which is in the southeast part of the state. We took disease ratings for leaf spot using the Florida 1 to 10 leaf spot scoring system. We also were able to rate for rust in this location last year. And we also reported white mold incidence at inversion. And we also harvested the plots and calculated yield. So in terms of the spray programs, I know this is kind of a busy slide, but what I tried to do was make it as easy as possible for you, where it's kind of color coded. So where you see Elast, it's always going to be this light blue color. If you have a copper sulfate and Topsin treatment, it'll be pink. Chlorothalonil is a dark blue. So in treatment 1, we have our non-treated control. And for this trial, what we wanted to do was, normally where you would see chlorothalonil, we wanted to use dodine as an alternative to chlorothalonil in a spray program with some of your common rotation partners that you use with chlorothalonil. So in this case, we have dodine plus Abound and Alto at timings 3 and 4. We also have Top Guard in there as well. We also have dodine with muscle and a microthiol, which is a sulfur material, Top Guard and sulfur, dodine and Provost Silver, as well as dodine and Fontelis. We also have Elast as a mixed partner with microthiol, as well as a copper-based product with Topsin alone, and then also rotated out with Abound and Alto, and also just a copper sulfate straight treatment only. We also have a chlorothalonil only treatment in 14, as well as our kind of standard spray program with Alto and chlorothalonil for treatment 1, then with chlorothalonil, and then Elatus and Meravis at applications 3 and 5, followed by chlorothalonil only at application 7. So in terms of the results for leaf spot, we have 3 leaf spot ratings. The white bar is our first rating for leaf spot, which actually was mainly early leaf spot on September 8th. And then our second rating is in the orange bar, which was kind of a mixture of early and late leaf spot, followed by a final rating of leaf spot on October 15th, which was predominantly late leaf spot. And as you can see from this, for our non-treated control, once late leaf spot came in, it pretty much took over pretty well and severely defoliated our non-treated control, which you'll see on the next slide. But overall, regardless of the rating date, most of the spray programs performed very well and significantly reduced leaf spot values when compared to the non-treated control. In terms of defoliation, as I mentioned, our non-treated control was severely defoliated by the end of this trial and reached about 90 to 95% defoliation. Overall, all of our spray programs significantly reduced leaf spot defoliation when compared to the non-treated control. Overall, the Dodine plus Provost Silver spray program had the lowest leaf spot severity ratings and was significantly lower than the chlorothalonil only treated control. There were 2 that were slightly more significant in terms of their leaf spot defoliation when compared to chlorothalonil, and that would be the Dodine only treatment was significantly higher than chlorothalonil, as well as Dodine plus Fontelis. So in terms of rust and white mold, as I mentioned, normally we don't see rust very high in terms of severity in this location, but we did last year and we were able to get some good ratings out of it. Overall, all the spray programs performed very well when compared to the non-treated control and significantly reduced rust. There were 2 treatments, the one that contained copper sulfate and topsin, as well as copper sulfate alone, were actually significantly higher than the chlorothalonil only treatment, but all the rest of them performed very well compared to chlorothalonil. In terms of white mold, the pressure was pretty low overall in this trial, but we were able still to see some differences statistically. But overall, all of our spray programs significantly lowered white mold incidence when compared to the non-treated control. Our standard with Alto, chlorothalonil, Elatus, and Meravis was the lowest. Overall, though, I would like to see some of these materials in a higher pressure situation for white mold just to see how they would perform, but still wanted to just present this data. So just moving on to yield, which is probably what producers are most focused on. All of our spray programs performed very well and increased yield when compared to the non-treated control. The only one that wasn't significantly different was the Elast, which is Dodine microthiol, which is that sulfur material with muscle. It wasn't significantly different than the non-treated control, but it was numerically higher. So just to kind of conclude and wrap up my presentation, overall, all fungicide spray programs significantly lowered leaf spot severity, rust, and white mold incidence when compared to the non-treated control. In terms of leaf spot defoliation, the Dodine only plus the Dodine and Fontelis treatments had significantly higher leaf spot defoliation, but Dodine plus Provost Silver had the lowest leaf spot defoliation values. For rust, as I mentioned, the copper sulfate alone plus thiophenate methyl, which is topsin, had significantly higher rust severity when compared to chlorothalonil only. So probably the biggest question I'll get asked, did we see any phytotoxicity in these trials? We did not. I know that's a concern with a lot of our sulfur and copper sulfate products, but overall, no phytotoxicity. And all the fungicide spray programs did increase yield when compared to the non-treated control. So with that, I'll just throw up the last slide with my contact information. I'd like to thank my technicians, Lee Campbell and Kathy Birch, as well as my predecessor, Dr. Austin Hagan, and the Wiregrass farm crew. And funding for this work comes from the Alabama Peanut Producers Association, as well as the National Peanut Board.
Okay, thanks, Amanda, for the presentation. There's a couple of quick questions that we have here. One is from Henry McLean. Maximum label weight for our latest is 9.5 ounces, and I think on one of your slides it had 15 ounces. Was that a typo or?
Yes, that was a typo. So I probably accidentally copied when I was trying to make that fancy color coded thing. So you are correct. I'll correct that for previous or for future presentations. Sorry, Henry.
Okay. And another question from Tim Brenneman. Any mixing issues with Elast plus sulfur?
Not that I've heard from, so we didn't do the mixing. Our farm crews apply it, so I can check with Chris Parker down at Wiregrass, but they didn't tell me that they saw any mixing issues.
Okay. And there was one more. Is Dodine a compound of concern for the EU?
I think it is on one of the lists as a potential concern, but I haven't heard anything else about it. I think compared to chlorothalonil, it's not on the top of their radar as far as I know.
Okay. I think that is all the questions. Does anybody, any other questions for Amanda? I don't think so. So thanks a lot, Amanda, for being here today and making a presentation. Great information. And I think the only announcements I have, this will conclude the plant pathology section and really our afternoon presentations.